You are listening to Fantha Tracks.
Because of the following special program, Wonder Woman and the Incredible Hulk will not be presented this evening.
It's time to get all your Star Wars news in a single file. This is Making Tracks. Here are your hosts, Mark Newbold and Mark Mulcaster.
That's not true. That's impossible.
You're listening to episode 83 of Making Tracks. I'm your co-host Mark Newbold, and joining me today is the wonderful, the verbose, the magnificent, the perfect partner for any podcast, Mark Mulcaster. Mark, how you doing?
I feel like there should be crowd effects and applause and that and cheering after that lovely intro. I'm good, buddy. How are you?
I'm very good, and the reason why I'm being so polite is because, well, I'll be honest, it's my birthday coming up, and I've just got a vibe, I've just got a feeling that I'm going to kind of get passive dig birthday wishes, because I am now officially an old fossil, and you're not.
Yeah.
So I'm just putting my foot in the door, just getting ahead of the game, you see. That's what it's all about. But I do think all those things of you there, Mark.
Oh.
Even the things I didn't actually say out loud.
Yes, especially those things. So, how are you? How's your week in Star Wars been, my friend?
As always, busy. I'm looking at a pile of books that need reading and reviewing that seems to get bigger and bigger and time gets shorter and shorter, but I'm doing my best. The site's ticking over, nice and busy there. I would say pretty good. It's one of those sort of lull periods between live action projects and animated stuff, so we've got Bad Batch coming soon, which I can't wait for. So how about you, mate?
Yeah, pretty much. Do you know what? I've been really good this last week or so. I finished reading The Queen's Peril, the second E.K. Johnson Padme book, which is actually kind of a prequel to the first one, which is a little bit confusing. I'm now steamrolling my way through Freefall by Alex Segura, which I think you read and interviewed for Cannon Fodder like a few weeks or months ago, didn't you?
A few months ago, yeah. It's a good book, good read. Yeah,
so I'm kind of like chomping that. I don't know why, but there was books that normally I'm pretty good when they get released. I read them straight away, but for whatever reason, I just kind of didn't. So I'm kind of catching up. and as always, the deliveries have been coming relatively thick and fast this week as well. So have you had anything exciting drop on your doormat?
I have. We reviewed on the site the Dr. Aphra audio and Dooku Jedi Lost a while back. The paperback book version of Dooku has come through, and the hardback version of Sarah Kuhn's Dr. Aphra has come through. So they'll both get reviewed this week. I enjoyed both immensely. But also the biggie for me this week is the Star Wars Archives, the prequel archives.
Oh, nice.
That turned up a couple of days ago. So got to pop the cellophane on it and start having a mooch. I haven't had a chance to read it yet, but very much looking forward to getting stuck into that. So that's the biggie for this week. Oh, and also the 2020 celebration Chris Travass print. It's the image of Leia on Hoth with R2 and 3PO holding up all of her wet clothes. That's that unseen moment when they turn the heating on and everything gets wet. It's that scene. So that turned up this week. Need to find a nice top loader for that and safely protect it because it's gorgeous.
The only piece of artwork that I did order from Celebration 2020 arrived this week as well, which was a Malcolm Tween print, which looks gorgeous. He does these kind of very like vehicle kind of like studies, really, I suppose you'd say, but they're really nice. But the colour and the texture's just up there. So I've got all of his. So he's one artist that I've kind of latched onto and been able to kind of like get all of his prints that he's released. But also I had a couple other things. One thing which you'll be quite interested about, I don't know if you've ever had one. It's from 1983 and it's proper ephemera. It is a Return of the Jedi promotional postcard from the Odeon Cinema.
Before you say anything, is that the one with Luke holding the blaster out with all the Gamorrean guards and everything around him in Jabba's palace?
It totally is, yeah. And the other thing I had, which was a bit of an oddity, I just kind of picked up randomly on eBay. You know the Super 8mm Ken Films reels that they did back for Star Wars, and I think they did a couple for Empire. You know, they did a black and white one, and they did like I think a colour one with sound and stuff. Well, that's right. Basically, somebody's taken the two different reels that you could get from Star Wars, which had different scenes from the film, but they were, I think, out of order. And he's basically put them together and edited them in the correct order. And he put it onto like a bigger reel. So I've got 400 feet of 8mm. You could almost say it's like a bootleg Star Wars film, really. Just kind of that arrived the other day. So I'm going to try and get that transferred digitally so I can, get it scanned in and have a look at it, because I thought that would be quite fun to just kind of see what it looks like, because I've never seen those Ken films projected anywhere, so I thought that would be quite fun. Yeah.
I have guilty memories of those early Star Wars Super 8s. And I'll tell you now, and this is one of those things I thought I'd take to the grave, but you've given me an opening to purge myself of my guilt. So it was about 1980, 81, there or thereabouts. My friend, Paul Squire, who I used to do stuff on Lightsaber, we've been doing Star Wars stuff together for years and years and years. And me, him and his mom went to visit her friend and her son, her infant son. We were about 10 at the time, but her son was about 3 or 4. He'd had an operation on his down below. Don't know what the operation was, but it was very tender and very sore. There's a point to this. The kid, his brother put on this Super 8 film of Star Wars for us, and we watched it. And of course, kids being kids, we pull out this plastic sword, and we're playing lightsaber fights. And I don't know what possessed me to hit the kid who'd had an operation on his you-know-what in the you-know-what with the hilt of the sword, but something in 10-year-old me couldn't resist, and he went down like a sack of spuds. 10-year-old kids deny everything. I denied everything.
Oh, yeah.
40 years later now, I can confess that, yes, I hit a 3-year-old kid in the dick with the sword.
And I think we've just got our title for this week's episode.
Maybe we have. Maybe we should move on before child services come and arrest me for things that happened a long, long time ago.
I don't know what the statute of limitations is for lightsaber injuries like that. Well, we could find out. So if we've got any lawyers...
The kid's probably like a 6'4" bodybuilder now who's held a grudge ever since, and now he knows. He's obviously a listener to Making Tracks. Now he's going to know who did it.
Yes, it's all your fault.
Always my fault. So, Andor is pushing on. Set images have arrived this week. There's been images that have turned up before. We've seen pictures before of the set. We know it's being filmed in Little Marlow in Buckinghamshire, and the locals, some were cool about it, some were ambivalent, some were angry. Chris Evans on his Virgin Radio breakfast show did mention that the set for Andor was, in his words, opposite the local garden centre. He's very excited that they're filming it there. And there are some fantastic pictures, which surprised me, not only because a drone was allowed to get so close, because there's technology that generally precludes that from happening, but a lot of these pictures show populated sets. I mean, there's clearly stormtroopers, there's actors, there's speeders. It's all there. The picture's on Fantha Tracks, and we've put the link in the show notes. But from what you've seen, what do you make of the images there so far?
Well, I tell you what, actually looking at this, I think it's the second image in. You can clear as day see that Chris Evans isn't wrong. There's definitely a garden centre, or well, it looks like a garden centre. Literally a stone's throw. I mean, obviously it's really hard to tell with perspective sometimes as to how far the distance is, but there's what looks like a little bit of forestry or shrubland, and then straight into the garden centre. So I suppose if you can pick up a couple of roses and daffodil, and then go and grab yourself like an extra roll on Andor. That's amazing. It's quite surprising because it looks like a couple of those photos, the way that everybody's grouped together, it sounds like it's possibly some kind of briefing or like, start of a day, this is what we're going to do. But you're right. Yeah, spoilers for those who want to remain unspoiled, but you can blatantly see some stormtrooper armor just stood around, guys and stormtroopers. And you can't really make out the rest of the citizens, but that TK stands clearly out, because there's a lot of crew, I'm guessing, who are probably in the darker clothes. And then there's what probably is going to be the extras they look like kind of red kind of clothes. So it does very much remind me of like Jeddah, like the kind of clothes that we were seeing in Jeddah.
One of the things that's mentioned is that green crane. You can see that on a lot of the pictures, a very big, tall green crane that is green screen green crane, if that makes any sense. And there's little bits dotted around the set that are exactly the same green. So that there's obviously set extension stuff. If you scroll through the pictures as well, the edge of some of the buildings is green screen. So clearly some of those, not all, but some of those buildings will be extended and expanded to go higher, which makes a lot of sense. That has got a Jeddah feel, and I love the way they designed it because you can see, looking down on it, there's little alleyways and little walkthroughs, and obviously it will be just like Jeddah was in Rogue One. It'll be CG expanded and digital backlot and all that stuff to fill it right out. But as it stands, I cannot, and this is the show I'm most excited for. I've said that many times. I can't wait to get into this little town, this little village, and have a look around and see what it's all about. It does look fascinating.
Fantha Tracks. Hoodoo!
As we come out the back of, hopefully, the global pandemic, San Diego Comic-Con have announced that in 2021, contrary to what people expected, there will be a special edition gathering in person that will take place, as well as the one that's happening online in July, at the San Diego Convention Center on November the 26th through to the 28th. So a 3-day event happening that will bring people in person to San Diego for a mini Comic-Con experience. it's November, so it's a little bit out. We're still quite a few months away. Organisations and governments around the world are all working on getting us back to some sort of normality. Just on that, do you think this is viable, Mark? Do you think it's doable? Do you think it's a good idea to be doing this? Or in a realistic world, have we got to start now thinking of future events? Because you must have stuff lined up in your book for the Legion.
Yes. Surprisingly, we've got quite a few events. I think there's a difference, though, isn't there? There's a difference between the UK take-up of a vaccination, which is basically what I think everything is hinging on at the moment, and also how successful the take-up is in the US. Comic-Con is the world's largest Comic-Con, so we're not talking about a few hundred people through the doors for a couple of hours. We're talking about 100,000 plus across the weekend. If you want the quintessential definition of a super spreader event, that is possibly it. But obviously things are slightly different in the US, and freedoms of movement and stuff like that is down to the states. And so if I'm guessing they're working with San Diego authorities and stuff, and if they think they can pull it off in a safe way, because it's still got to be relatively safe. I think you can't go back to how things were before the pandemic. And they even kind of give the explanation that the event's hopefully going to help kind of shore up financial reserves, which I'm guessing these companies have only got a finite amount of money that they use to operate and carry on when they're not getting any other revenue. So it gives a lot of vendors, I think, the opportunity to kind of get those convention exclusives out as well, whereby an online convention, you can do all your kind of reveals for your casting and your films and your TV series, press panels and stuff like that. But it's not quite the same when it comes to getting access to the exclusives. So this is probably a great way to offer both in possibly spread out across a year. So yeah, it's a good thing, although with a caveat that I guess we have to just wait and see.
It's a fluid situation.
Yeah.
The thing here in the UK seems to be will be driven by the data, not the date. Yeah, if we get to that point and everything stacks up, then of course we want to get back to normal and we want people to prosper and, like you say, make profit and move on like they should and hopefully will. But if that crazy strain comes in, if that third wave comes in from Europe, which it might because there's issues over there at the moment, everything changes. So I think it's quite brave of San Diego to do this. A company like San Diego Comic-Con will have numerous employees that when the button is ready to be pushed, they will want them ready and mobilised to go. But it's an opportunity for natural wastage with companies. It's also an opportunity for people who want to move on. These companies and any other MCM, Showmasters, any of them, have got to be ready to hit the ground when the moment comes, haven't they?
Yeah, absolutely. I think so. There's enough time now to be able to plan ahead. MCM, for instance, they took a decision, so ReedPop took the decision earlier this year to not put on any events until later this year. So the first two MCM events in the UK are going to be in the back end of the year, October, November, which is normally when the convention season kind of really wraps up completely. So that gives them time, gives everybody time. And obviously the problem is the vaccination, especially in the UK, obviously it's focusing on the most vulnerable and it's going down in ages. But the younger generations are it's the teenagers, people that age who tend to kind of go to Comic-Cons. I'd probably say there's probably more of a demographic for, 18 to 25-year-olds and possibly older farts like me and you more so than me. And those are the ones who aren't getting vaccinated. As such, the teenagers aren't the ones who get vaccinated. So there is that risk that actually the actual events might have to kind of turn around and say, we're going to have to impose some kind of vaccination passport scheme, a bit like they've been discussing recently with pubs and stuff like that.
That's true. And a lot of the attendees are like we were back in the day, so it's no different. We're teenagers, 20s, 30s, whatever. But a lot of the guests, the stars, inverted commas, certainly aren't that young. Pensacon in Florida is happening in May. Gerald Holmes there, Michael Pennington's there. There's a lot of older actors who are appearing at these events. Now, I think back to Jeremy Bulloch, who would always come round from his side of the table to take pictures and shake hands and meet people, have a little chat, because that's how he was. There are a lot of other actors who are just the same, who like to do that. In this environment now, you've got to hope that the younger guests who've not had the opportunity to meet these actors, but who will have seen them interact with people like that, will understand their reticence to not come around the table anymore. It has very much changed the landscape of what these events are, I think, certainly in the short term, but possibly just going forward.
Hi, Paul Blake here, Greedo from Star Wars A New Hope, and you're listening to Fantha Tracks.
You've already mentioned at least once that this Wednesday, it's your birthday. Yes, let's be fair. You're cracking on a bit. You know, half a century is good innings, mate. Let's... But I mean,
Make me sound like I'm done.
I was going to say, you've not been bowled out just yet, just to kind of follow on with a cricket analogy. So how are you planning to spend your birthday then? Have you got any plans or anything exciting you're doing, or what's on the cards?
Oh, well, it's not what it would have been, obviously, given everything that's gone on. So everybody I ever went to school with has either turned 50 or is about to turn 50. So a lot of school get-togethers and birthday parties and all sorts of stuff that was being talked about for years that just haven't happened, sadly. And it's the same for me. I was all planned to have a 50th birthday party, but we're not doing it. So the day will be reasonably quiet, nothing crazy special. But I did think, because I've seen these things on Facebook, these fundraiser opportunities that you can set up. So you can set it up and it gives you suggestions based on who you follow and what you do. So I had a look at one and I thought, that's actually a cool idea. A couple of friends had done it. I thought, that's a really sweet idea. And I donated to a couple. And then the opportunity came up to do a birthday fundraiser for Rancho Obi-Wan, because obviously, you know, it's on the sidebar of the site. We talk about it a lot. It was kind of in my head anyway. I've got a little Rancho shrine in the collection, so it's somewhere that I think about quite a lot. So I set it up only a couple of days ago as we speak now. And within like 3 or 4 hours, we had £100 of donations, which was my initial limit. So I nudged the limit up a little bit. We hit that target. We nudged it up a little bit, hit that target. So as we speak, we're at 94% of the goal. The goal is 275 English pounds. Mm-hmm. And as we speak, we're at 258. So we're nearly there. So probably by the time this comes out on Tuesday, I'll have nudged it up a little bit more, hopefully. I'll put the link in the show notes. It only runs to the 2nd of April. I'm saying it now. I'm looking at it here. It's saying 275 target. I think I'm probably going to nudge that up to 300. If we can get to 300 by the time it ends on the 2nd of April, and we can send whatever that is in dollars to Rancho, I'd be thrilled to bits, because like I say, there's not going to be a birthday party. I would never expect anyone to get me a present or send me a present. Get me a beer when we catch up at the next convention. That'll do for me. But it was just seemed like a cool, fun thing to do. And yeah, got a bit of a buzz watching the numbers go up. So if you've got a spare fiver knocking around, not that anybody has, but you know, if there's a few shekels down the back of the sofa, ping them into this Rancho Obi-Wan birthday fundraiser. Links in the show notes. And yeah, if we can get to £300, that'd be rather groovy, I think.
I think it'd be great. Like you said, Rancho Obi-Wan, it's a great cause. And going back to what we just talked about, charities, especially smaller non-profits and stuff like that, have had a really hard time trying to make sure that they can keep the lights on and a roof over their heads. So as much as I'd like to say I could accommodate Steve's collection should he needed to lighten the load, I can't. And I personally think there's probably no better place in the world than Rancho Obi-Wan to keep the Stars collection and that flame kind of burning. So I think you've done an amazing job. I've already donated. I might even donate some more just to see if we can kind of get up to that final figure. So well played to you, my friend. And obviously, it goes without saying, happy birthday. I know it's a couple of days away, so I will no doubt say it again. But thought I'd mention it on the podcast so everybody else who's listening can just kind of echo and go, happy birthday, Mark.
For everything in one location, daily news, reviews, interviews, podcasts, video, and social media feeds, bookmark banthatracks.com for Star Wars news 24/7, 365.
So whilst Oscar Isaac might be done with Star Wars, he hasn't quite finished up his time working on big studio franchises. As it turns out, he looks to be cast as the main role in Moon Knight, which apparently is a Marvel comic. And I say apparently because I've never heard of it myself. But he's meant to be donning the role of Mark Spector. It's going to be a Disney Plus series. So obviously we talked the other week about Daisy Ridley possibly taking on the role of Spider-Woman. It looks like from the tweets that it's a green light for Moon Knight. Mark, have you seen this? Do you know much about the character or about the comic or anything?
You know, I've got a couple of issues of it, and Moon Knight was one of those characters that kind of passed me by a little bit in the 80s because I was very X-Men and Spider-Man focused, and Moon Knight was, to me, kind of sat in that Doctor Strange, Defender sort of, not a top-line character. So I'm really pleased to see characters like, for example, Shang-Chi get a shout, Moon Knight get a shout. In the Netflix era of Marvel, Iron Fist get a shout, and Power Man, Luke Cage get a shout. So characters that were not the top line main, like Avengers or Fantastic Four, X-Men or Spidey type characters. So I know a little bit about him. He kind of always came across to me a bit like the Marvel version of Batman, not in his background, but in the character's kind of intensity and what he did and such. But yeah, I can't really say much more than that. He's not a character I read a lot about. But looking at this, that Mad Gene Media post, he's clearly in proper, inverted commas, training for something, because it's kind of got that Daisy training for Ray vibe about it. And all the rumours do have him down as playing Mark Spector. So I think the big thing is, and I keep coming back to that luxury hotel quote that Boyega said, which just makes me smile, is that Oscar Isaac wants to, and has never stopped sort of expanding his CV and doing very varied roles. You know, he'll go and do a sort of a hard-hitting action thing on Netflix, then he'll go and do a small independent film, character-based stuff, then he'll come back to playing Poe again, and now it looks like he's doing Moon Knight. I think he'd be great, and I think with a lot of the Star Wars actors, you mentioned Daisy, you know, they talk about Spider-Woman. There's also the talk about Batgirl or Batwoman for her as well. I think given the chances of major success, if you want that to be part of your MO as an actor, which who wouldn't, because you want all your stuff to be successful, you'd probably pitch for Spider-Woman. Plus, she's worked with Tom Holland, so there's opportunities there. Maybe not as a Disney Plus show, but as a movie. You just wonder what other actors in that Star Wars realm would want to come across. You know, if Boyega got the chance to play a Marvel or a DC character, you think, what character would he want to go for? What character would he want to get his teeth into? Now a Golden Globe winning actor. I just wonder what other characters or what other actors would want to come across.
That's a good point. But as you said, actually, it was John Boyega who kind of came up with that term, the luxury jail. There's something to be said, because the thing is, when we look at Marvel, and we do compare it to Star Wars and vice versa quite a bit, Marvel has a super rich, deep level of pool of characters that they can pull from. Like you said, I've never heard of Moon Knight. You know, that's no shade on the actual comic book or the actual character. That's just, like you said, if he's like I don't want to say lesser known, because that kind of diminishes his importance perhaps, but yeah, a less popular or less well-known comic book character, well then that's good. And the question I have in my mind is actually, is that maybe something that producers of Star Wars should be doing? Should they be looking at the well of characters that we've got, especially in the expanded universe, and maybe what characters we then pull out from expanded universe to put into their own show, rather than necessarily having to come up with new characters, which you've always got the balance between will they be liked or not. But potentially, if you could find characters from the EU that have already got like an interesting backstory that could be expanded upon, why could they not do that instead?
I think cherry picking certain characters, they come with a little bit of infamy, I guess. Pick an example. If you take, not that you're ever going to tell the story of Mara Jade exactly as it was told back in the day, because you can't, because everything around it has changed. But if you took that character archetype, called it Mara Jade, you know, she's worked in the underworld like she did for Talon Card, she's the Emperor's Hand like she was for Palpatine, and all the other things that happened, and maybe she doesn't marry Luke Skywalker, but there's connections to certain characters, and you do what they did with Thrawn when they took the character of Thrawn and took him out of that EU setting and put him into the Rebel setting and moved forward, as Zahn has done really quite well, considering he's written both iterations. If you could do something like that, I think that would be really, really interesting.
When you speak of The Mandalorian, I think they did the right thing, because actually, I'm not too sure that Din Djarin is actually that good a bounty hunter. He's a bit like Harry Potter. He seems to kind of rely heavily on his friends, as it were.
Yeah.
And also, actually, now, it wasn't until that episode with Mix Mayfeld that he was pretty much the tank because of his armor. And then you strip the armor off, and suddenly he needs to fight and he needs to defend himself. He was a bit lucky, to be fair. And maybe that was a conversation they had. Maybe they were like, actually, how do you bring in a new like title Mandalorian character? And, you know, if he ever comes up against Boba Fett, that he can't have anything on Boba Fett, really. And I think that's one way they've done it, because even Boba Fett in The Mandalorian has kind of got a presence that I don't think Din Djarin's ever likely to have.
But don't you think Fett in The Mandalorian, the older Fett that we've now got, sort of, I mean, I think the character's still only in his 40s. Obviously, the actor playing him, Tamira Morrison's in his 60s, but Fett's been in the Sarlacc for an amount of time. So obviously, you don't know what effect that would have on a person. It would probably age you quite significantly.
Possibly,
so
yeah.
You can stack that up. That's not a game changer. Plus, he's a clone, and there's all other elements of that to tie into it. But I think with Fett in The Mandalorian is a little bit like comparing Anakin before he fell into the lava with Darth Vader.
Okay.
Do you know what I mean? So he's Anakin, after he'd come out the lava, was mentally scarred as well as physically scarred.
Yeah.
You wonder if the galaxy would be the same if Anakin Skywalker had turned to the dark side and not become Darth Vader in anything other than name. Whereas after he comes out of the lava, he's just Darth Vader, rather. He's just Darth Vader. Anakin has been seared away by the lava almost until the original trilogy, and it's Luke that starts to pull out those regressed memories. That's a deeper scenario than Fett, but Fett, before he goes into the Sarlacc pit and after he comes out the Sarlacc pit, you've got to wonder. We've not seen enough of him to really know, but is he still that guy? That's why I'm looking forward to Book of Boba Fett. We're going to find out, is he still that guy? Stone Cold before he breaks his neck and Stone Cold after are two different wrestlers. The big moment in their careers, all three, Vader, Fett and Stone Cold, how do they adjust to this sort of cataclysmic event in their life? And are they still the same guy? Are they even trying to be the same guy? And I think Fett will be really interesting to sort of see how he plays that out. I like the thought process there of where could that be taken as a dramatic presentation as a show.
Yeah, I've just finished reading the latest issue of Darth Vader, or at least the latest issue I've got, which I think is, I don't know, Vader 6 or 7. We're 5 years in, pretty much into kind of the Marvel comic releases, aren't we?
Yeah.
From the very first issue, like, he's constantly being tested by the Emperor. He's constantly being tested, and he's constantly having to battle with these kind of flashbacks. And I think it's very difficult to go more than a couple of issues in the Darth Vader comic where they don't utilize some form of memory flashback in some description. It's very much focusing on the PTSD. And the latest issue, they do this really nice kind of merging of key moments in Anakin's life from really like Mustafar up to when he faces Luke, but they kind of swap some of the characters over and they put Vader in one position as, in the opposite position to where he was. So, like, you actually see Luke kind of like charging him down on Bespin rather than the other way around. With Boba Fett, I don't think there's that kind of necessarily that kind of damage for him, to maybe experience in the Sarlacc pit. I could be wrong. I suppose it all kind of comes down to how long he was actually in there for, really, and actually how much of his body has completely changed. We saw on Typhon when he kind of meets Din Djarin about, but actually out of the two people, it was Fennec Shan who basically had all the kind of the cybernetics and stuff like that. And he might actually have completely different perspective and actually more of a gratitude for just being alive, potentially. Or he might actually have that change of perspective where basically he's wanting to reclaim what he feels like he should have got, and he's owed something by the galaxy, but he could possibly get back by taking over Jabba the Hutt's kind of dynasty.
Yeah, it's true. It's true, though, that Anakin has got more obvious issues to deal with.
Yeah.
If you look at his life, he was a slave, he lost his mother, the whole thing with Padme, turned to the dark side, all that stuff. But I think with Fett as well, there's an element of he was a clone, he watched his father get beheaded by the Jedi.
Yeah.
He was trained by Aurra Singh and all that whole storyline, and then fell in with the bounty hunters and all the other stuff that he did, and then seems to have very much become a loner. So I think he's got issues as well, but they're very different characters. Obviously, Boba was raised in the sort of Mandalorian culture. I know there's all these questions about, is he really Mandalorian, yes or no, and yada yada. No doubt he was raised in that culture. That was how he was brought up. So his internalizing of any issues he had is probably quite deep. He's stuck in the gut of the Sarlacc for we don't know how long he was down there, presumably a fair chunk of time. Probably the first time he's not been able to just freely go about his business and do his thing, and was stuck, and probably thought a bit like Mando did when the Mudhorn was chasing him down. He just puts his head down with the little penknife, basically.
Yeah.
I'm done here. So maybe he kind of came to peace with himself, maybe. I don't know. I'm hypothesizing completely. I just think when Fett comes out, it's not just the obvious physical thing that's happened to him. And it'll be interesting when we see Book of Boba Fett, because we saw that video, we talked about it on the show, of Tamura doing the training in his weights room and stuff. So obviously he's getting into game shape to film it. Obviously the filming, I think it's pretty much done. It's out in December, isn't it? So, that's not that far away, really. It'll be interesting to see how they play that aspect of it. Going back to your original point about going back to pulling characters out of the EU. On one hand, it's baggage. On the other hand, it's nostalgia for certain viewers and readers. Other people may never have heard of the character. Hit up Wikipedia and go, blimey, there's books and comics about this girl, or books and comics about this guy, or whatever it might be. I think that only adds to, it's the exposition you don't need, isn't it? It's already there. You don't have to talk about it. It's there. And there's 250,000 inhabited planets in the Star Wars galaxy, or however many there is. You don't need to keep explaining stuff. I think it could be really interesting.
I'm Gareth Edwards, and you're listening to Making Tracks on Fantha Tracks Radio.
So Kevin Scott was interviewed recently on the Comic Book Nation podcast, and during the conversation, a question was asked in regards to the era of the High Republic, which of course Project Luminous, Kevin Scott and other authors are working on right now, and it's moving on very nicely with the Marvel Comics, the books, but also the Acolyte, which was the announced forthcoming Disney Plus TV series that apparently takes place at the end of the High Republic era. He was asked, what are the connections, or are there any connections? And I'm going to read the quote that Kevin said, because I think it's a good starting off point for what we're going to talk about. Kevin Scott said, no, because I think we predated that, because we've been working on this for a good number of years now. So what happened was people were getting excited about the High Republic as we were creating it, which was great to see. And there have been all these other plans as well. But the great thing that Star Wars is so good at is taking the things that have been worked on over here. This thing's been worked on over here, so let's bring it all together. It's kind of what we were talking about a minute ago in our previous segment.
Yeah.
And I mean, the High Republic as an era goes on for an awful long time, because that period of time before the fall of the Jedi. And so it's been really exciting to sort of see other threads of Star Wars coming in as they've been developed as well, and see us all working together to get to that for those final points. But yeah, it's going to be exciting, isn't it? So basically, we're over here doing Project Luminous, High Republic. Other people are over there doing whatever they're doing. We're all kind of seeing what each other's working on because it's a shared universe, but it's not having a huge effect on what we're doing affecting them, what they're doing affecting us, because they're Phase 1 High Republic, so you're 230 years before A New Hope. The Acolyte is the end of the High Republic era, which is about 80 years before A New Hope. So that span of time is about 170 years. Project Luminous is right at the very top of it, and Acolyte, by the sounds of it, is right at the bottom. Do you think they're just setting it in that era and that's it? Or do you think they actually have story thematic tie-ins? What does your gut tell you?
I think that it will be somewhere in the middle. I think it will kind of just come down to, you have to set the Acolyte as a TV series on its own terms first. And you also have to assume that probably only a small percentage of the Disney Plus subscribers would have read any of the High Republic books. And let's take WandaVision, for example. There's all these Easter eggs and all these bits and bobs that was leading us to give us clues as to what the main story was really about. And some people who are very savvy and obviously study the comics very well and in great detail was able to pick out the bits and the threads and stuff. But for me, as a completely casual Marvel fan, just the fact that like they kind of give you a reference to when it's set and, you know, effect of like the blip and all that and bringing people back, that was enough to tie it in for me. And so I wouldn't be surprised if they do something like that. You know, we've seen in some of the more recent Star Wars comics that they use High Republic era technology as either MacGuffins, like they're using in the new Aphra series.
Yeah.
Or actually, even in Aphra 4, you know, she climbs into what I think they just generically refer to as an High Republic era spaceship. They don't call it like a Jedi Vector, and I don't think it is or anything like that. And then we saw in Star Wars, Luke finds a High Republic lightsaber. And so suddenly they're kind of now dropping all these bits in, you know, the timeline to try and tie it all together. Obviously, how well they do it, sometimes it can be a little bit obvious and feel a little bit shoehorned in and a bit convenient, and other times it kind of works. So I think they have to find a balance. Like you said, they're in Phase 1 of the High Republic, and we don't know how popular characters like Avar Kriss are going to be. They could be massively popular, and at that point, somebody might say, you know what, we need to do a TV series focusing on Avar Kriss because she's awesome, and there's a lot of good storytelling that we can do about that. I always thought when they talked about the High Republic was kind of like, I don't know, at least 500 years before the events of Phantom Menace. So I was quite surprised that it seemed so close to when the Phantom Menace was. You know, 200 years didn't seem like, in the grand galactic scale of things, actually a very long time at all.
I felt very much the same when they said about the High Republic and the absolute peak of the Republic, given that the Republic's, 25,000 years old or something crazy like that. It's many millennia. There have been other republics, but essentially they've seeged into each other. Yeah, I thought that the golden age of the Jedi would have been 2,000 or 3,000, 4,000 years before, not 200. So, I mean, I guess what they're accentuating is this terrible fall. And I don't suppose they ever referred to it. I don't know, maybe they did. You don't refer to an era as something when you're living it. So no. I don't think the people of the High Republic referred to the era as the High Republic. Obviously, if the Empire is taken over, you are now living in the Imperial era, and you know it because they're in charge. But I think the High Republic, as a republic that is continuously going on, that has peaks and troughs and wars with Mandalore and all sorts of other things that happen. Maybe I'm wrong, but I don't think they would refer to that era as the High Republic era themselves. It's something that we look at as a reader or as a viewer externally, because you like to look down the chronology of history and go, well, that's the Tudors, and that's the Georgians, and that's the Victorians, or whatever it might be, you know, and work your way through. With the Acolyte, just because it happens to be set at the end of that era, I don't necessarily think it has anything to do with the characters of the High Republic.
No. I mean, although saying that, there are a couple of characters in the High Republic that obviously end up being Phantom Menace. Obviously, Jedi Master Yoda is one. And they've been pretty good so far about actually, he's not really interested in things. He's out with younglings on a ship.
He's on the Starhopper, isn't he?
Yeah, he's on the Starhopper, yeah, exactly. So he's following his own course and stuff. And it doesn't seem to be too interested in what's going on per se. And probably more surprisingly was Yariel Proof. You know, has been mentioned a couple of times in the books and stuff. And he is again in Phantom Menace. So there'll be these kind of little touchstones. And I guess there kind of needs to be, because I think you need to have, when you're creating a universe, you shouldn't rely on and fall on some other previous material to kind of set up your story. I'm pretty sure they probably won't do. I mean, the Acolyte kind of sounds to me like it could almost be a young Palpatine. It could be young Palpatine just learning the ways of Darkseid or something like that. You know, or even actually Darth Tenebris. Tenebris was Plagueis' master. And that's me referring back to EU again. They could go completely a different way, and this could all be about Zabraks, for all we know, and it could all be about like the precursor to a Darth Maul, for instance, or someone completely different. Who knows?
It's interesting, the seeding into the story of High Republic stuff. It's a bit like Galaxy's Edge a couple of years ago, and all of a sudden Galaxy's Edge was being mentioned in everything, Solo and every comic, and there was a mention of Batuu, which was fine because, you know, we're not stupid. We know they're trying to sell us stuff, so put it in there, it's in our line of sight. And now that's all gone very quiet. Now it's all High Republic stuff. The only thing that doesn't quite work for me is the thought process of you get, 30 years after A New Hope, and you're in the sequel trilogy era, and all of a sudden, in just a generation, people are like, so the Jedi were real? So there was a Luke Skywalker? Yeah. So it's almost like us talking about Excalibur, which was supposedly centuries ago, but it's not. It's 30 years. It's within a lot of people's lifetime. I talk about Empire Strikes Back all the time, and that was 40 years ago. I ain't forgot it. I've not forgotten hitting that kid in the knob with a sword. You know, it's that sort of stuff. So, you know, we wouldn't forget it. And I'm thinking Star Wars, there's a lot of holonet stuff and information that's given to you on the news. But of course, there's also a lot of oral information. Stories are passed down from father to son, mother to daughter, grandfather to grandkids. History and tradition is a verbal thing. And so I don't understand in the sequel trilogy era quite why all of that was it seemed to be literally forgotten. Yeah. So the kids on Canto Bight, they're orphans, they're abandoned kids from bets gone wrong in the casino sort of thing. And so they've got nobody else to tell them the stories. They're not there to learn, they're there to work. So you understand it with them. That's why that scene doesn't go against this. But I think generally around the rest of the galaxy, and Rey lived basically on her own. She was abandoned on Jakku, so she only knows little bits. And for the most part, you are meeting characters whose access to history is very limited. Finn will only know what he was told. All the kids that were stolen to become stormtroopers will only know what they've been told. So there is that. But I think with the High Republic era being referred to in the modern era, it works in things like Afra because she's an archaeologist. So she's going to be coming across all this ancient old stuff. They could overdo it. Finally going back to this point, I just think the Acolyte, I think it's very much like you've said. The Sith have been silent for 1,000 years. There's no conflicts particularly of any note. They've kept their heads down and they're building and growing. Talk about patient. Like you say, I think it's just the start of that gearing up. They're sensing things in the Force because, you know, the High Republic era was the height of the Republic and of the Jedi, and that tails off. So the Force is moving as well. That's the connection for me. I think that's where the connection really is. I think that the dark side of the Acolyte characters are picking up on an opportunity that light side characters of the High Republic, because there's no Sith, you know, it's all the Nihil and all the other characters. Their focus is elsewhere. So I think that's where the connection is probably coming from.
Well, buddy, I think that's all we've got time for today. Nice to chat as always. Enjoy the waning days of your 4th decade. Have a great birthday. And everybody else, thank you for listening. If you've got this far, well done you. Pat on the back. Obviously, no listeners' question this week, but if you want to get in touch, Birthday Boy can tell you how you can do it.
You're going to have to help me a lot more now because I'm so elderly, I'm going to start forgetting things. If you want to be part of the action and stay updated on all the latest Star Wars news, visit panthertracks.com or check out the free Panther Tracks app through the App Store to follow us on your mobile device. You can reach out to us and send in your listeners' questions by emailing radio@panthertracks.com. Like Mark said, we have a saggy bag at the moment, there's nothing in it, so please fill it with letters. Comment, like and share on any of our social media feeds @PantherTracks, and be sure to subscribe, leave a review, preferably a 5-star one, on Amazon Music, Audible, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, or your podcatcher or smart speaker of choice. And as always, thanks to James Semple for composing the Panther Tracks intro, Adam O'Brien, and I'll just say Adam has done his final episode of Panther Down Under. He's moving on to greener pastures with the Lethal Mullet network, so good luck to Adam. Stay in touch, mate. We really enjoyed having you on our network. For doing our Making Tracks opening music, and Mark Daniel and Vanessa Marshall for our voiceovers.
Cool. Off you go then. Have fun. I hope Ruth does spoil you. I'm sure she will do on Wednesday. Everybody else, of course, stay safe, take care. May, of course, be with you. And try not to hit any 3-year-olds with lightsabers.
Coming up next on Panther Tracks Radio, it's another episode of Making Tracks.